Last case, felony drug driving, sir.
Felony? All we gotta do is turn that over to the grand jury. We could still make it.
I'm afraid not, Your Honor.
Did a single controversial scene really end one of NBC's most beloved courtroom comedies after 9 successful seasons? The truth behind one of television's most beloved courtroom comedies isn't what the history books tell you. Behind the laughter, the magic tricks, and Harry Anderson's quirky charm was a web of rising tensions.
Are you surprised at all the success of Night Court?
Well, yeah. I mean, you want to talk odds. The odds of a show getting on the air and then staying on for...
Backstage drama and network politics that would ultimately seal the show's fate. And today, we're going to explore the wild world of Manhattan's night shift courtroom to uncover the truth behind some pretty shocking rumors. The courtroom that changed everything. When Night Court premiered on the 4th of January 1984, it immediately stood apart from the safe, formulaic sitcoms of its era. While most comedies focused on suburban families or traditional workplaces, creator Reinhold Weege chose a far stranger setting: New York City's night shift criminal court. This backdrop allowed the show to explore the bizarre, chaotic, and often hilarious situations that arose after dark, showcasing a world television had never dared to portray in such a comedic light. At the heart of the show was Harry Anderson's Judge Harry T. Stone, a character unlike any other TV authority figure at the time. Young, quirky, and enamored with magic tricks, Stone rejected the stiff, authoritarian demeanor typical of courtroom dramas. Instead, he approached each case with curiosity, warmth, and unconventional wisdom, making the character both relatable and unpredictable. The setting itself amplified the comedy, as the courtroom became a stage where absurdity and humanity collided night after night. The ensemble cast brought even more uniqueness to the series. John Larroquette's Dan Fielding pushed the boundaries of television humor with his sleazy, innuendo-laden antics, while bailiff Mac Robinson contributed toughness and grit. Perhaps most memorable was Bull Shannon, the towering but gentle court clerk, whose childlike innocence often revealed surprising depth. Together, they formed a cast of characters that balanced outrageous comedy with genuine moments of connection. What truly set Night Court apart was its rotating cast of defendants and cases. Each episode introduced prostitutes, petty criminals, eccentric street performers, and countless oddballs from New York's underbelly. Instead of sanitizing these realities, the show embraced the chaos, finding laughter in places where most sitcoms wouldn't dare look. Behind the jokes, though, the writing often carried a sharp edge, addressing issues like homelessness, mental illness, and inequality with surprising nuance. Ultimately, Night Court struck a rare balance between zany comedy and thoughtful social commentary. Its fearless handling of controversial subjects, combined with its eccentric humor, resonated deeply with audiences. While critics initially struggled to categorize it, viewers embraced its originality, making it one of NBC's most reliable hits of the 1980s. In doing so, Night Court paved the way for more experimental sitcoms, proving that television could be both hilariously absurd and socially conscious, often within the same half hour. Behind the scenes. The on-screen chemistry of Night Court's cast was one of its greatest strengths. But behind the cameras, the relationships were far more complex. Harry Anderson, who played Judge Harry Stone, brought authenticity from his background as a magician and street performer. His casting came after NBC executives noticed him on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and his charisma made him a natural fit. However, Anderson's perfectionist tendencies and demands for precision often made him a difficult colleague, setting the tone for some of the backstage challenges. John Larroquette's role as Dan Fielding became iconic, though it almost never happened. Originally auditioning for the part of Mac Robinson, Larroquette impressed producers so much that they created the sleazy prosecutor role specifically for him. His performance earned him 4 consecutive Emmy Awards and cemented him as one of television's most unforgettable comedic characters. Yet, the humor came from behaviors, constant harassment, and inappropriate advances that, while played for laughs in the 1980s, would be viewed as highly problematic today, even then pushing cultural boundaries. Markie Post entered in Season 2 as Christine Sullivan, the public defender and frequent target of Dan's unwanted attention. Post's intelligence and warmth gave her character depth, but she had the difficult task of playing opposite Larroquette's over-the-top antics while keeping Christine relatable. Writers also struggled to balance Dan's comedic value with accountability for his behavior, highlighting the tension between progressive storytelling and the era's more outdated comedic conventions. The show's bailiffs provided both continuity and tragedy. Selma Diamond, beloved for her sharp wit and gravelly voice, died of lung cancer after Season 2. The show respectfully wrote her death into the storyline and recast Florence Hallup as Florence Kleiner, only for Hallup to also pass away from cancer 2 years later. Marcia Warfield was then brought in as Roz Russell, adding a tough, no-nonsense energy that helped reshape the show. These losses cast a shadow on the series during its most successful years, deeply affecting the cast and crew. Other ensemble members contributed balance and depth. Charles Robinson, as Mac Robinson, grounded the show with a quiet strength and dramatic weight, often anchoring the more chaotic stories. Richard Mall's Bull Shannon, though given fewer lines, became a fan favorite thanks to his towering presence and gentle spirit. His innocence and surprising wisdom made him one of the most endearing characters in the courtroom, offering some of the show's most memorable lines. Despite the ensemble's undeniable success, working with so many strong personalities came with challenges. Anderson's controlling approach sometimes clashed with others, while Larroquette's method-like intensity could create tension on set. The writers worked tirelessly to craft episodes that gave each character meaningful moments, often weaving together multiple subplots. This balance was key to Night Court's appeal, but also added to its rising production costs, as each actor's growing prominence demanded higher salaries. The result was a show that thrived on creative energy, while struggling under the weight of its own success. The episodes that pushed too far. The on-screen chemistry of Night Court's cast was a huge part of its charm, but behind the scenes, things were far more complex. Harry Anderson, who played Judge Stone, was a real-life magician whose background in street performance and comedy clubs gave him a unique edge. His authenticity translated seamlessly to television, yet his perfectionist nature and insistence on precision often made him a demanding presence on set. Anderson's casting was somewhat accidental, discovered after a performance on The Tonight Show, but it became the defining role of his career. John Larroquette's journey was equally unexpected. Originally auditioning for the part of bailiff Mac Robinson, the producers instead crafted the role of Dan Fielding specifically for him. This sleazy prosecutor quickly became one of television's most iconic characters, earning Larroquette 4 consecutive Emmy Awards. However, while Dan's constant sexual innuendos and harassment were played for laughs in the 1980s, they also reflected behaviors that were becoming increasingly controversial, highlighting a cultural tension between comedy and changing social norms. Markie Post's arrival in Season 2 as Christine Sullivan brought balance to the show. Her character's warmth and intelligence countered Dan's inappropriate antics, though the writers often struggled with how to handle his behavior without undermining Christine's strength. Meanwhile, the revolving door of bailiffs added both drama and tragedy to the production. Selma Diamond's witty presence was cut short by her death from lung cancer in 1985, and her successor, Florence Hallup, passed away just 2 years later. Their losses deeply affected the cast before Marcia Warfield finally stabilized the role with her sharp, tough-humored Roz Russell. Other cast members helped ground the show in both comedy and emotional weight. Charles Robinson's Mac Robinson offered steady gravitas amidst the chaos, while his chemistry with Anderson gave the series heart. Richard Mall's Bull Shannon, with his towering figure and childlike innocence, became a fan favorite, often delivering some of the show's most memorable and unexpectedly profound moments despite his limited dialogue. Together, these characters added layers of humanity to the show's wild humor. Yet, the strength of the ensemble also bred tension. Anderson's controlling tendencies and Larroquette's deep method approach sometimes clashed with other cast members' interpretations of their roles. The writers worked hard to balance each character's importance, often juggling multiple subplots within a single episode. While this storytelling method gave everyone a chance to shine, it also increased production costs as cast salaries rose alongside the show's success. Behind the laughter, Night Court was a show defined as much by creative conflict and real-life struggles as by the joy it brought to audiences. The chemistry of Night Court's cast was undeniable on screen, but the behind-the-scenes dynamics were far more complicated. Harry Anderson, who played Judge Stone, brought authenticity from his background as a magician and street performer, but his perfectionist nature sometimes made him difficult to work with. Discovered after appearing on The Tonight Show, Anderson's improvisational skills made him ideal for the role. Yet his insistence on precision could create friction with cast and crew. John Larroquette's journey was equally unconventional. He originally auditioned for the bailiff role, but was instead given the newly created character of Dan Fielding. This sleazy prosecutor became one of television's most infamous figures, earning Larroquette 4 consecutive Emmys. While his behavior was played for laughs in the 1980s, Fielding's relentless harassment and innuendos reflected problematic attitudes that were already stirring debate at the time, showing how the show straddled comedy and cultural controversy.
You don't like it.
Well, it's just not really you.
Yes, it is.
That part is, but the whole thing is kind of,
Marquee Post's Christine Sullivan added warmth and intelligence when she joined in Season 2, often serving as Dan's target, but also as his foil. Off-screen, the role demanded careful navigation of tone, as the writers balanced Christine's strength against Fielding's inappropriate advances. Meanwhile, the revolving bailiff role added real-life heartbreak. Selma Diamond's gravelly wit ended with her untimely death in 1985, followed by Florence Hallop's passing 2 years later. Their losses deeply shook the cast before Marcia Warfield stabilized the role as the sharp-tongued Roz Russell. Other cast members provided emotional grounding. Charles Robinson's Mac Robinson brought dramatic weight and a steady presence, often anchoring the chaos with sincerity. Richard Mall's Bull Shannon, though sparingly written, became a breakout favorite. His towering figure, paired with a gentle, almost childlike innocence, made him both comedic and unexpectedly profound, delivering some of the show's most memorable and heartfelt moments. The ensemble's strength was also its challenge. Strong personalities often clashed, with Anderson's controlling tendencies and Larroquette's method approach sometimes creating tension. The writers worked tirelessly to balance storylines, often weaving multiple subplots so each character had space to shine. While this strategy gave depth to the series, it also inflated costs as cast salaries rose with its success. Behind the laughter, Night Court was shaped as much by creative struggles and personal losses as by the joy it delivered to its audience. The money problem that killed the magic. By the late 1980s, Night Court had cemented itself as one of NBC's most valuable sitcoms, but its growing success came with rising costs that eventually threatened its future. After 8 strong seasons, the producers initially planned to end the series in 1991, largely due to escalating cast salaries and the increasing difficulty of producing fresh storylines. What had once been a relatively affordable show was now becoming one of NBC's most expensive comedies, forcing the network to weigh creative ambition against financial sustainability.
None of that language in my courtroom. Offense?
My clients plead innocent, Your Honor.
What grounds?
Well, they claim to be victims of...
Harry Anderson, the face of the series, played a central role in these challenges. Beyond commanding a significant salary as the star, Anderson sought greater creative influence over the show's scripts, casting, and storylines. Meanwhile, John Larroquette's rise to stardom, bolstered by 4 consecutive Emmy wins, further inflated costs, transforming what began as a balanced ensemble show into one with multiple stars demanding premium pay. The very ensemble dynamic that made Night Court unique also made it financially complicated, as other leads like Marky Post, Richard Moll, and Charles Robinson all negotiated for higher compensation. Production expenses extended beyond cast salaries. The show's detailed courtroom set required constant upkeep and modifications, while its steady rotation of guest stars often brought in established performers with higher price tags. Even signature elements, like Harry Stone's magic tricks, required specialized props and consultants. The writing staff also contributed to the budget strain, as Reinhold Weij's team of top-tier writers demanded premium pay for crafting the complex, socially conscious comedy that distinguished the series. NBC's corporate culture shift during this period compounded the issue. Under new management, the network prioritized cost-cutting and profitability over creative risks, meaning shows like Night Court faced greater scrutiny from executives focused on budgets. At the same time, the evolving syndication and advertising markets reduced the show's value. Stations in conservative regions hesitated to air episodes addressing sensitive topics, limiting syndication reach, while advertisers grew cautious about linking their brands to controversial content. The show's boldness, once a strength, had become a liability in terms of revenue. Broader industry changes also worked against Night Court. Competing comedies with younger, less expensive casts drew advertiser attention, while international markets proved difficult for the show's New York-centric humor and fast-paced dialogue. At the same time, cable television and home video fragmented audiences, making it harder for any one series to justify rising production costs. Despite retaining popularity, Night Court was caught in a shifting media landscape where financial pressures outweighed creative achievements, leaving it vulnerable to cancellation. The uncomfortable truth about Season 9. The 9th and final season of Night Court exposed the cracks that had been forming for years. The creative team had planned to wrap the series in 1991 after 8 strong seasons, but NBC's decision to renew it at the last minute derailed that conclusion. The renewal was a financial move. NBC needed dependable content to fill its schedule, and Night Court, despite high costs, was still a safer bet than untested shows. This forced extension created a chaotic environment that compromised the show's integrity. Tensions between Harry Anderson and the production team had reached a breaking point by this stage. Anderson pushed for greater creative control, but his background as a performer rather than a writer meant his input often clashed with the established tone and character dynamics. With Reinhold Weij no longer guiding the series day to day, newer writers struggled to maintain consistency. Storylines began to feel recycled or contrived, lacking the spark that once made the show's blend of comedy and social commentary so effective. John Larroquette's Dan Fielding was particularly difficult to adapt in the changing cultural climate. His lecherous antics, once considered outrageous but funny, were now increasingly uncomfortable. Attempts to soften or reform him felt inauthentic, while keeping his behavior unchanged risked alienating viewers. At the same time, the show leaned heavily on celebrity guest appearances to generate interest. What had once been a fun element now felt gimmicky, with famous faces shoehorned into storylines that contributed little substance. The rushed production schedule further eroded quality. Episodes were written and filmed faster, leaving little room for the careful craftsmanship and rehearsals that had once defined the show. The balance between comedy and social issues collapsed. Serious episodes rang hollow, while lighter ones felt shallow. The courtroom set itself lost its authenticity, transformed into a stage for formulaic gags and forced nostalgia. Even the cast chemistry suffered, as fatigue and behind-the-scenes frustrations crept into performances. By the end, Night Court was a shadow of its former self. Network executives, increasingly wary of controversy, pushed for safer, more conventional storylines, stripping away the very elements that had made the series stand out. Running gags and callbacks felt more like desperate nostalgia than organic humor, and the emotional depth that once grounded even the wildest episodes was largely gone. Instead of a triumphant finale, the show limped to its conclusion, remembered fondly for its glory years, but leaving audiences with a bittersweet reminder of what it had once been. The finale that nobody wanted. The two-part series finale of the original Night Court, titled Opportunity Knock Knocks, aired in 1992. But what fans witnessed wasn't the grand conclusion that such a groundbreaking show deserved. It was a hurried, unsatisfying ending that reflected all the problems that had plagued the final season. The finale's production was complicated by the fact that it wasn't originally intended to be a finale at all. The creative team originally decided to end the show in 1991, after 8 quality seasons. With that plan set, Season 8's conclusion had been crafted as a natural ending point. When NBC renewed the show for an unexpected 9th season, the writers found themselves scrambling to create a new conclusion that could adequately wrap up years of character development. Harry Anderson's Judge Stone was given a send-off that felt both predictable and unsatisfying. The character who had spent 9 years growing and evolving was reduced to familiar personality traits without the depth that had made him compelling. The finale focused more on nostalgia than on providing meaningful closure for his journey from unconventional rookie to experienced judge. The romantic relationships that had developed over the show's run were resolved in ways that felt rushed and superficial. Christine and Dan's complicated dynamic was given a conclusion that did not satisfy fans who wanted them together and not those who preferred they remain adversaries. The writers seemed unable to decide what kind of resolution would be most satisfying, resulting in an ending that pleased no one. Perhaps most disappointingly, the finale failed to address many of the social issues that had made Night Court special throughout its run. Instead of using the final episodes to make a statement about justice, compassion, or social progress, the writers opted for safe, conventional storylines that could have appeared in any sitcom's final season. The two-part structure created additional problems. The first part built toward revelations and changes that the second part failed to deliver satisfactorily. Plot lines introduced in Part 1 were resolved hastily in Part 2, creating a disjointed viewing experience that didn't feel like a cohesive conclusion to the series. They ended their run in '92 with an extremely disappointing show, which wrapped the characters' fates nicely, but lacked any type of laughs at all. This assessment from viewers captures the fundamental problem with the finale. It prioritized tying up loose ends over providing the entertainment value that had drawn audiences to the show in the first place. The ensemble cast that had been Night Court's greatest strength felt fractured during the finale. Instead of working together as a unit, each character seemed to exist in their own separate storyline bubble. The chemistry that had made their interaction so enjoyable throughout the series' run was notably absent during these crucial final episodes. Guest appearances in the finale felt obligatory rather than meaningful. Former cast members and recurring characters returned not because their presence served the story, but because finale conventions demanded their inclusion. These appearances highlighted how much the show had changed, rather than celebrating what it had been at its best. The finale's tone was inconsistent with the show's established voice. Night Court had always balanced comedy with genuine emotion, but the final episode swung wildly between forced comedy and melodramatic sentiment without finding the middle ground that had made earlier episodes so effective. Most critically, the finale failed to acknowledge Night Court's cultural impact or its role in changing television comedy. The show that had pushed boundaries and challenged conventions ended with episodes that felt safely conventional and disappointingly ordinary. There was no recognition of how much the series had accomplished or how it had influenced the medium. The aftermath of the finale was equally problematic. Not only had the previous 2 episodes been explicitly billed as the end of the show, but they sent several of the series' main characters off into the sunset or into outer space, only for them to pop up in court once again in boat show as if nothing had happened. This confusing situation left fans unsure about what actually constituted the show's true ending. The critical and fan reception of the finale was largely negative, with many viewers feeling that their investment in the characters and storylines over 9 seasons had been wasted on an unsatisfying conclusion. The finale became a cautionary tale about what happens when financial considerations override creative ones in the television industry. The legacy of missed opportunities. In the years after its disappointing conclusion, Night Court's true significance in television comedy became more apparent. Though its finale was widely seen as a creative misstep, the series had already made a lasting mark by blending social commentary with humor. It demonstrated that sitcoms could be both funny and thought-provoking, a balance that influenced shows across decades, from The Golden Girls to Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Its legacy proved that comedy could take risks while still appealing to broad audiences. One of the show's most important contributions was its ensemble approach. Rather than leaning on a single comedic lead, Night Court thrived on the chemistry between its eccentric characters. This model inspired later workplace comedies like Cheers, The Office, and Parks and Recreation, which also drew humor from the interplay of diverse personalities. Harry Anderson's portrayal of Judge Harry Stone further set the standard for quirky but approachable authority figures.
Anderson earned 3 Emmy nominations for his role as Judge Harry Stone on Night Court, which ran for 9 seasons. He also had a recurring role on Cheers and starred in the CBS comedy Dave's World in the 1990s.
Paving the way for characters such as Michael Scott and Leslie Knope. Casting and character development also became hallmarks of Night Court's influence. John Larroquette's Dan Fielding showed that flawed, even unlikable characters could still be compelling, a lesson that carried forward into more complex sitcom writing. The show also embraced unconventional leads and gave recurring and guest characters a major role in shaping its world. This approach created a more expansive and flexible storytelling style that later sitcoms adopted to keep their narratives fresh. Production choices added another layer to its legacy. With its reliance on live audience reactions and minimal editing, Night Court brought immediacy and energy to its episodes. While most modern shows no longer film in this style, the attempt to capture a sense of spontaneity has remained central to comedy. Its success in syndication also reinforced the idea that sitcoms with timeless humor and universal themes could thrive long after their original run. Still, the show's legacy is complicated. Elements such as jokes about harassment and stereotypical portrayals have not aged well, reminding audiences that Night Court was both ahead of its time and bound by it. Critics and historians recognize its innovation, but its weak final season has kept it from reaching the legendary status of contemporaries like Cheers. Even so, its influence on sitcom structure, character design, and the fusion of comedy with social commentary is undeniable, ensuring its place as a groundbreaking, if imperfect, milestone in television history. What could have been the perfect ending? Looking back at Night Court's troubled conclusion, it's hard not to imagine how different things could have been with better planning and more creative freedom. The show's potential for a meaningful, impactful finale was enormous, given the rich character development and social themes that had been established over 8 successful seasons. The ideal Night Court finale would have embraced the show's greatest strength, its ability to find profound humanity in seemingly absurd situations. Instead of focusing on plot mechanics and character departures, a better conclusion would have presented one final case that encapsulated everything the series had been about: justice, compassion, and the recognition that everyone who enters the courtroom is a human being deserving of dignity and understanding. Judge Stone's character arc deserved a conclusion that acknowledged his growth from an inexperienced idealist to a seasoned jurist who had learned to balance wisdom with wonder. The perfect finale would have shown him handling a case that demonstrated how much he had learned while still maintaining the childlike curiosity and magical thinking that made him special. His departure from the bench should have felt like a natural evolution rather than an arbitrary ending. Dan Fielding's character presented the greatest challenge for any potential finale, given how problematic his behavior had become by modern standards. However, a skilled writing team could have used the final episodes to show genuine character growth without betraying the essential elements that made him entertaining. Perhaps a storyline that forced him to confront the consequences of his actions could have provided both comedy and genuine character development. The ensemble cast deserved individual storylines that honored their contributions to the show while serving the overall narrative. Christine's intelligence and compassion, Mac's strength and reliability, Bull's gentle wisdom, and Roz's tough exterior hiding a caring heart all should have been highlighted in ways that felt organic rather than forced. A better finale would have acknowledged Night Court's cultural impact and its role in changing television comedy. The show had broken new ground in addressing social issues, and its conclusion should have recognized that achievement while looking forward to the continuing need for compassion and justice in society. The courtroom setting itself deserved a farewell that honored its role as more than just a backdrop. This space had been where justice was served, where human dramas played out, and where audiences learned to see beyond stereotypes and surface judgments. The perfect finale would have treated the courtroom as a character in its own right. Guest appearances should have felt meaningful rather than obligatory. Former cast members and recurring characters should have returned for reasons that served the story, rather than simply satisfying fan service expectations. Each appearance should have added emotional weight to the conclusion, rather than distracting from it. The show's commitment to live performance and audience energy should have been maintained through the finale. The immediacy and authenticity that had always distinguished Night Court from other sitcoms deserved to be preserved in its final moments, even if that meant accepting the occasional imperfection that comes with live television. Most importantly, the perfect Night Court finale would have trusted the audience's intelligence and emotional investment in the characters. Instead of explaining everything or tying up every loose end, it would have allowed viewers to use their imagination and continue the characters' stories in their own minds. The show's legacy should have been one of complete artistic achievement, rather than missed opportunities and disappointing conclusions. Night Court deserved to be remembered as a series that maintained its quality and integrity from beginning to end, rather than one that exemplified how external pressures could compromise creative vision. The real story behind Night Court's ending is not about a single infamous scene or shocking moment. It's about how financial pressures, creative differences, and changing cultural attitudes combined to bring down one of television's most innovative comedies. The show that had fearlessly tackled controversial subjects and redefined what sitcoms could accomplish ultimately fell victim to the very commercial forces it had once transcended. Night Court's legacy remains complicated but undeniably influential, proving that even imperfect endings can't diminish the impact of groundbreaking television. What do you think was the real reason Night Court couldn't maintain its magic in the final season?